to keep you and your family safe tonight at 11.
Today on Katie, what are your kids playing?
The longest he ever played was for 72 hours, 3 straight days.
Parents who had no idea what a video game would do to their son.
It is such a chilling and unbelievable story.
He said, "Close your eyes, I have a surprise for you." I had been shot in the head.
The exclusive jailhouse interview with the so-called Halo killer.
Do you remember that look on her face?
I do.
Your son had killed your wife and his mom. How do you wrap your head around that?
Then, how a video game addiction ended his NFL career.
You tried to destroy these games.
I could not stop.
You sacrificed your lifelong dream. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Adam Lanza in Newtown, James Holmes in Aurora, and Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris at Columbine. They were all said to be obsessive video game users. Today, we'll hear firsthand from a young man from just outside Cleveland, Ohio, who played violent video games to the extreme. And when his parents tried to take them away, he shot them. His mother was killed, but his father, Mark, survived.
Danny was a real fun kid. He was always laughing, giggling. He was very adventurous, sports-minded, very smart. Our family life was good. It was very good. It was very healthy. We just wanted our kids to grow up and be healthy and to, prosper, to do good. Danny started to get a little bit rebellious. Testing the waters. What kid doesn't? We definitely kept an eye on what he did. During the winter, him and his friends, they went snowboarding. He wiped out pretty hard. The doctors informed us that he can do nothing physical. And so he just pretty much got depressed. He was at home playing a lot of video games. These violent, gory video games. My wife and I would not allow them at home. The constant shooting and killing of people and the blood and the gore. As a hunter, we're taught you never point a weapon at a person, even if it's not loaded. He would just sit there and play and play and play. Danny had become obsessed with the Halo series. He actually was doing a lot of lying to us about the game, sneaking out of the house, actually, to go play the games. When Halo 3 went on sale, he jumped out his bedroom window and went and bought it. My fear and Sue's fear in playing these games is that he would become possibly violent and that he would be numbed to what it is actually like for somebody to be shot and killed. It was pretty much a basic normal day. Danny just went in his room and I kind of dozed off for a few minutes. And then Danny came into the room and said, "Hey, Mom, Dad," and I kind of woke up a little bit, and he said, "Hey guys, can you guys close your eyes? I have a surprise for you." I looked over at Sue, and she looked at me, so we closed our eyes. And after that, I woke up, and I was completely numb. I was totally confused. I looked over at Sue. Looked like she was sleeping. I did not know I had been shot in the head. And as soon as I looked down, I saw there was blood everywhere. And I just went, oh, wow. And then it just hit me hard. He just shot me. It hit me real hard. I never thought that my son Danny could ever be violent in any way.
Mark Petrick, thank you so much for being here. It is such a chilling and unbelievable story.
Yeah.
What happened after you were shot, Mark?
Well, after I was shot, I was in and out of consciousness. And the only thing I really remember after the paramedics took care of me, I don't remember really anything they did, but just going out the front door. They said I was awake and trying to talk, but I couldn't talk because my jaw was broken a couple places.
I know that your daughter Heidi and her husband Andy saved your life that day. We have the 911 tape of that call. Let's listen.
What's going on?
I don't know what happened. I just came over to my parents' house because we were going to watch the game. And my mom is shot and my dad is shot and my brother's here.
Does anybody know what happened? Did your brother shoot your parents?
I don't know. I think so.
That's pretty hard to hear, isn't it?
Yeah, sure is.
You know, after the shooting, you were in very bad shape. Critical condition. What was the extent of your injuries?
I was shot from here down through here.
And in fact, looking at you now, if you don't mind, I don't know if you all can see the side of Mark's face, but it appears a part of your jaw is missing.
It was. They rebuilt my jaw. They took a bone out of my leg at Cleveland Metro, and they put it in my jaw. I have a skin graft. It's not completely, symmetrical, but they did a great job.
You were put in a medically induced coma.
2 weeks.
When you came out, what were you told?
My family came in, and they said, Mark, that night Sue died almost instantly, and we've already had the funeral, and she's been buried.
When you realized that your son had killed your wife and his mom, how do you wrap your head around that?
In the hospital, when I came out of the coma, all I did was think about that, and I could not get the pictures out of my mind. I was really, it's like being tortured. And the more I thought about it, the more I became angry. I just became very, very angry. In fact, so angry that everybody that came to visit me said, "How's Danny doing?" I said, "Don't talk about him. I don't want to hear about him. I hate that kid. He killed my wife, his mom." I was really angry. And I believe I had a right to be angry.
I think you did too.
Yeah.
What role do you think, Mark, violent video games played in Danny's actions?
A huge role. His actual character, the type of kid that he was, just fun-loving, joking kid, he changed. He became very withdrawn. He became isolated. And we were wondering what was going on. It literally changed him. We did not know that he was playing hours and hours and hours on end. In fact, the longest he ever played Halo 3 was for 72 hours, like 3 straight days. And all he did was go to the bathroom, drink pop, and eat a couple bowls of cereal. No sleep.
And you saw him doing this, and you tried to stop it, but you just couldn't?
No, we couldn't. Now, in our home, yes, he could not play them in our home. We would not allow them. But when, a teenage boy goes to hang out with his friends, I'm not the type of dad, or my wife wasn't the type of mom, we're just going to monitor everything he does all the time. He's going to go do what he's going to do. But we ended up finding out, and he just kept changing.
Well, when we come back, our exclusive interview with Daniel from prison. That's right after this.
Up next.
Did you think I'm going to go get a gun and I'm going to kill my dad? You fired the gun. Do you remember that look on her face?
What is it like for you hearing your son tell his story?
That's next.
And we're back talking about the shocking story of Daniel Petrick, who shot his parents after feuds over his obsession with violent video games. ABC News correspondent Deborah Roberts traveled to Ohio for an exclusive interview with Daniel in prison. Deborah, thank you, first of all, for doing that for us. And what was it like just meeting him for the first time?
Well, what struck me first, Katie, is the fact that he's no longer a kid. He was 16. Daniel was 16 when he committed this horrible crime. And in the 5.5 years, he's basically grown up. He's become a man in prison. And what else struck me, too, was the fact that he seemed so utterly normal. He was lovely. He was smart. He is polite. It was really, really difficult to square that with everything that you've heard about what he's done. But we sat down for about an hour, and he reflected on all kinds of emotions and talked a lot about this unspeakable crime. Let's take a look.
I had a very good childhood. Mother and father that cared about me. Everything I needed was provided for me as a kid.
Your dad was a pastor. Was it tough being a preacher's kid?
It was difficult having a father as a pastor because that's not always what I was interested in. I just wanted to run around and have fun and hang out with friends.
So you were a rebellious kid.
I absolutely was a rebellious kid.
Was there tension with both your mom and your dad?
More so with my dad, because he was the head of the household and the one laying down the rules.
You were also an athlete.
I was.
Was that part of your sense of self-esteem, playing sports?
I took a lot of pride in that. I've always been an active kid, ever just going outside, throwing around a football or riding a bike.
Then you had a snowboarding accident.
Right. I jarred my back pretty hard, and I didn't realize it was as serious as it was at the time. I had to be hospitalized, and I was on heavy doses of antibiotics 4 to 5 months. I went from up all the time, active, and then I was just, laid up in the house, laying around doing nothing.
And how did that affect you?
I kind of filled that hole in that excitement that I was seeking. I found that in the video games that I was playing at the time.
At what point did it become much more attractive and much more powerful to you?
Before the accident, I would play video games every once in a while. It was just another passing thing. But after the injury, that was my outlet. It became my way of entertaining myself.
So how much did you play? How often?
Before the injury, maybe once a week I'd play for an hour or two.
And after?
It got to the point where I would probably 18 hours a day.
18 hours a day playing video games?
How does a drug addict look for drugs 18 hours a day or 24 hours a day from the moment he wakes up till the moment he goes to sleep? That's how it got for me.
How did you learn about the Halo games?
A friend of mine actually bought it. I was in middle school at the time.
What was that rush like when you were playing the games like Halo that were more intense?
It was a way to forget about everything else going on. It was an escape.
How much did these games take over your mind?
It would be to the point where I started neglecting responsibilities in order to make room for these. I'd be at school and I'd be thinking about it during class.
You were an addict, but you probably didn't know it. When did you and your dad start to butt heads over this game?
He didn't like them. They said this is becoming too much, and we don't approve of the violent video games. So they just took it away as a whole.
So tell me about that day, October 20th. How did you wind up with a gun in your hand?
We always did a lot of hunting and a lot of target shooting. So there was a lot of guns in the house. I went and got the gun from my dad's closet.
Why did you go get the gun to begin with?
I was angry at my dad. He was firm about it, adamant about it, that there would be none of this, and that's the way it was going to be. And so that created a lot of resentment and a lot of anger.
So did you think, I'm going to go get a gun and I'm going to kill my dad?
I did. I went in my room and I was mad. I told my dad, hang on, I got something I want to show you. I went and grabbed a gun and...
Your dad said that you came out and you said, close your eyes.
Right.
Then you fired the gun. At your mom first?
No, it was at my dad first.
Do you remember that look on her face?
I do.
Did you think that you were just hurting them? Or did you think that you were killing them?
I didn't understand. Like I said, I was a teenager at the time. There's a difference between knowing something and understanding something. And understanding that I was taking a human life.
You were seeing the blood on your parents, on your mom. What were you feeling at that moment?
I'm used to playing these games, and at the end of every round, everything just resets. At the end of every level, everybody's still there.
But you're 16 years old. I mean, you've got to know your parents aren't going to reset after you fire this gun at them. Are you blaming the video game for what you did?
No. I've always taken responsibility for it. I don't try to deny that. I know it's nobody's fault but my own. Did it play a part? Yes, it did. It was the catalyst behind a mindset that caused a murder.
Your dad at that time was fighting for his life. When he finally came to, he said that he hated you. He despised you. Can you understand that?
Absolutely. You know, could I blame him? You know, in light of what I did today, even if that was the way he still looked at me, could I blame him? I don't think I could.
Mark Petrick, watching that just must tear you up inside, does it?
Yeah.
What is it like for you hearing your son tell his story?
It's very emotional. It's hard. To hear that again, to see everything, it's very gut-wrenching. It's hard.
He recounts it in a very matter-of-fact way. Were you struck by that, Deborah? He seems almost detached from his actions.
He comes across as detached, but you got to remember, he's growing up in prison. He is in a very, very tough place with some tough characters, so he's got to survive. And I think that he just can't betray those emotions. But when he talked about his mom, you notice that he stopped. He had a very difficult time talking about his mom and his love for his family.
Were you surprised at the grip these games had on this young man? I mean, you compete with nameless, faceless people all over, so you're getting the interaction, not only the excitement of this game that sucks you in, but you're competing against all these people.
Your competitive juices are just going. And that's what Daniel told me. I didn't understand it. He said, yes, it's the violence, I mean, the shooting and all that, and he probably was desensitized, but he was caught up in the competitiveness of it, because Daniel is the kind of guy who goes all out when he's doing something, and that's why he could play for hour after hour after hour, because he's competing.
And so chilling when he said he thought his parents could reset.
That part really startled me.
Well, I know you talked at length with Daniel about his relationship with his father, Mark, today. And when we come back, we're going to talk about that and also ask Mark if he's somehow been able to forgive his son. That's right after this.
Up next.
What was that like to hear your dad say he loved you?
It was a feeling of, I do not deserve that.
What's your reaction to that, Mark?
And later, an NFL star walks away from the game and his entire career for a video game addiction.
I can't go a day without going out and buy another game.
You sacrifice your lifelong dream.
That's still to come.
We're back with Mark Petrick, who was shot by his own son after a fight over his son's growing addiction to violent video games. ABC News correspondent Deborah Roberts, who interviewed Mark's son Daniel in prison, is also with us. You know, I'm curious, Mark, at some point, were you able to forgive your son?
Yes, actually, that happened while I was still in the hospital. I prayed and asked the Lord to help me because I was so angry. And I don't want to live my life that way. It's just, you know, and I would teach on forgiveness, you know, to our people in the church, the congregation. And here I am laying there saying, I don't forgive him. I want to kill him. That's how I felt. And I'm a pastor of a church, but pastors are no different than any other person. They really aren't. We're all the same, and my emotions were way out of hand. And so I just prayed and asked God to help me.
You asked the judge for leniency during your son's trial.
Yes, because I knew Danny was truly remorseful. I mean, every time I went to visit him in jail, all during the trial, he would look at me and he said, Dad, I can never forgive myself for what I've done.
I want to play another clip for you from Deborah's interview. Daniel talks about how he reacted to your forgiveness.
Yeah.
What was that like to hear your dad say he loved you after you had just taken away your mom's life and almost his?
It was a feeling of, I do not deserve that. That's how I felt. He had told me that, and in my head I was telling him, yeah, and I love you, but in my mind, in my heart, the feeling was, I don't deserve that.
What's your reaction to that, Mark?
He deserves it. He deserves forgiveness. We all deserve forgiveness. And I will now continue to choose to forgive my son. I want to help him. And I want to help get the word out to other people so these kinds of things don't continue to happen, like the Sandy Hook shootings in Connecticut, the Columbine. They're all related. They're all video game related, every one of them.
And Katie, if I can add, it's not just his dad who's forgiven him. His two sisters have forgiven him. And they come to visit him. And he is just in awe of the fact that his family has wrapped their arms around him and continues to love him.
And his grandpa and grandma, too.
He is not eligible for parole until he serves 23 years. Did he talk at all, Deborah, about the future?
He did, and that surprised me because I would think that at this stage, he's 20-something years old, I would think that he would just feel his life is lost. What is there to think about? But believe it or not, he actually does. He quoted Emerson, Katie. He reads a lot in prison. He said that he groveled for a long time. All he thought about was this horrible crime and his horrible, remorseful state. And now he's trying to move forward and think about the future. He's hopeful because he would be, 40 years old when he got out of prison if it did happen. And I think he wants to try to be a better person, a better man. And he really is trying to make something of himself.
Dr. Michael Wellner is here. He is one of America's top forensic psychiatrists. He's also the chairman of the forensic panel. Dr. Wellner, we heard what Mark said. He wants to spread the word and believes that these mass shootings are video game related. Do you believe that to be the case? What influence do you think they have on these people who play them obsessively for hours on end?
I would submit that in this case, that your son had a pathological attachment to playing video games, but the killing happened when they were taken away from him. It's a very different pathway from the Lanzas and the Breiviks and the Mohammed Merahs. The key attachment connection between mass shooting and video game violence is that the mass shooters use the video games as training videos, and they use them in order to help them detach, because you have to be alienated from everybody to kill anyone. This is a very different crime. This is a crime that happened in the home, and I would tell you that if I had to characterize it, I would say that it's an emancipation murder. It's a person who is in a hostile, dependent relationship with his strict father, who looks at other homes that are more permissive and says, I want to be free. And the role of video game violence, just based on what we scientifically understand, is that blood and gore do feed the arousal. They feed the arousal of hostility. Teenagers need to get a message. You know something? If you kill your parents, not only do they not come back, but the freedom that you're looking for is 20-odd years in prison, and that's not free.
Well, you're going to stick around, I know, and talk with us some more about this. In the meantime, Mark, I just want to say thank you so much for coming in. And I'd also like to say that you have remarried. You've been remarried for a year, but I don't want your wife, Sue, to be forgotten in all this.
She's not. My wife, Lisa, really encourages all of us to keep the memories. And she even suggested that, the family should have a time whenever we decide, to just get together and talk and relive all the good memories. She's a very good lady.
Well, I'm happy for you.
Yeah, I'm very happy.
Good. Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you again. Deborah, thanks so much for going to Ohio and going to that prison. Thank you so much for doing that for us. It's always great to see you. Thanks, Deborah. Not all stories of video game addiction end in violence, but the consequences can still be devastating. When we come back, the story of a promising professional athlete who walked away from his career because of his obsession with video games. That's right after this.
Still to come, are video games to blame for violent crimes?
The truth is, we know this is an issue. The White House knows it's an issue. This is about the public saying we've had enough.
That's later.
When my next guest was drafted into the NFL, it was the culmination of a lifelong dream, but a growing addiction to the popular military-style video game, Call of Duty, turned that dream into an unexpected nightmare. In the summer of 2007, Quinn Pitcock had it all.
I was living the dream, I was just coming off my senior year for the Buckeyes, and then being drafted in the 3rd round by the Indianapolis Colts. So I was on the right path for greatness. And then, things turned for the worse.
Overwhelmed by the pressures of playing professional football, he fell into a deep depression.
Moving to Indianapolis, I all of a sudden was away from everybody. I became secluded from friends, family. I stopped going to my workouts. Stopped, doing what I needed to do for my professional career. I called my agent and said, look, I'm done with football. I can't do it right now. It's not for me anymore.
Behind the decision to leave the game he loved, a stunning revelation. A secret video game addiction.
I ended up spiraling down where video games was taking over my life. Once I did quit with the NFL, my addiction got even worse, and that's when I really got into the 18-plus hours a day, eating one meal a day, and secluded from everybody. My whole family, my friends, everybody away from me.
Quinn Pitcock, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
How did this addiction start? I mean, when did you kind of just feel this pull?
When I realized it was when it was a physical need. It was no longer just a mental, like, oh, I want to play. It was, I didn't want to play anymore. But physically, I had to play, and I could not stop.
It started when you were drafted for the Colts, and you were in a new city. Mm-hmm. You didn't really know anyone. I know you're shy by nature.
Right. I'm an introvert, so, I do better by myself. I'm happier that way.
So it was kind of an escape, in a way, for you to just play these games. And I understand video games are also part of the culture of the NFL. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Especially during the off-season. We have workouts, off-season workouts, and some of us do charity during the day. And the rest of the day is basically off. Guys are off playing, football games, Halo, Call of Duty like myself. And, even where I was at in the locker room, we had a video game system, and we would play in there. And that's kind of how it started with me. I ended up buying a game system for home. And then the online play is what really got me, because no matter what time of day, there was someone playing. I got to a point where I started ranking and doing well. I was, top 300 in a hardcore team deathmatch, top 50 in hardcore search and destroy, top 100 in team deathmatch, and that's top ranks out of 3 of millions and millions of people. And so in my mind, I was doing, doing well. So why keep on playing?
You're like, I'm the man.
Exactly. And if I really put myself to it, I could have been number 1 in ranking some of those, but I didn't want to be that guy.
And you sacrificed your lifelong dream of playing in the NFL because you didn't want to take time away from these games? Is that what made you say, I'm not going to play football, I'm too busy doing this?
It's a combination. I have such a respect for the game that I wasn't fully 100% committed, so I felt they were better off without me.
Ultimately, you did get help.
Right.
From the Indianapolis Colts.
Right, correct. That's what I'm saying. They do want to help you. It's not like they shunned me out at all. They were there to help me. But it's like any addict. You can't get recovery until you are ready to accept you're an addict and that you want recovery. And that was the part that I wasn't ready for. It took me at least 6 months to a year until I started going to the psychiatrist provided by the Colts.
And where are you in the recovery process now? I mean, can you not play any video games? Do you have to stay away from them? Is it like being an alcoholic?
It's one of those things. I'm always going to be a recovering gaming addict. I started off going from one addiction to another, to video online poker, to online auctions, so at first I was just replacing addictions, and to this day I still have troubles with just a smartphone game applications. If I get myself in a room or too much time, I could catch myself into a game and hours into it without realizing it.
It's amazing how powerful the pull is for you. I know you hope at some point to play in the NFL again.
Yes.
You're playing arena football now?
Arena football down in Orlando Predators with the AFL, yes.
What would you say to other kids who love these video games who may be watching this right now?
Talk to a third party and just speak your mind. To me, I realized once I got things off my chest, it was a lot easier to get away from the games, because the games are a way to separate yourself from reality. And it's a virtual reality that you can control. Once you face the truth of reality, I think you can move forward.
Quinn Pitcock, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And best of luck to you. And thanks for telling your story today.
Thank you.
you. And when we come back, we're going to take a closer look at the potential dangers of violent video games. That's right after this.
Coming up later, signs someone you love has a video game addiction. The red flags every parent should know.
This is where you're losing control of your daily function.
That's later.
We've been hearing a lot today about Halo and Call of Duty, two violent video games which are very popular, but many of us don't really know how they work. So we asked one of our producers, Alex Kushner, to do a little show and tell for us. Let's take a look.
Halo is a first-person action shooter game. You are a colonial marine, and your objective is to take down the aliens from another planet. The weapons that you use in Halo are futuristic, kind of AK-47 type weapons, fully automatic weapons that probably could take out, 50 to 100 guys realistically if it was a real weapon. Call of Duty is another first-person shooter. Takes place in present day. You play as an elite Navy SEAL soldier, and your job is to take down terrorists across the globe and use real weapons like a 50 caliber rifle, an M4, a 9mm, a rocket launcher, real weapons. You're shooting real people in the game. They're humans. There's real blood. There's real violence, explosions. Realistic combat you would see in a real war zone.
Psychiatrist Dr. Michael Wellner has been with us throughout the hour to help us better understand video game obsession. And we're also joined now by Colleen Moore, a counselor with the Illinois Institute of Addiction. So what impact does playing violent games have on an individual's behavior? What does it do to them in terms of their impulse control or even to their neurological state?
I think research is still wrestling with that. But what we've been able to establish is that violent video games increase the arousal, increase hostility in a number of people who play them. And they neurologically affect the player in such a way that they're desensitized to violence, desensitized to gore. So the combination of arousal and even enticement to violence may come outside of the video game, but the desensitization is a very key element of how they affect us.
And Colleen, have you found that some people are more susceptible than others? I mean, are these people who have inherently addictive personalities?
Well, I think that many of us have some component of addictive personality, but there's an equation that I like to use that identifies and helps me understand how this can become an addiction. The equation is accessibility, so having access to the behavior or the game, plus acceptability with someone's environment to continue to engage in this behavior, continue to engage in the game, plus a predisposing factor, which can be one of three things, and that could be a genetic component. And what research is showing now is that it's not just a family history of alcoholism like we're used to hearing about. There may be alcoholism in the family, but we're also now seeing video game addiction within the family, along with alcoholism, gambling, and things such as that.
So a genetic component.
Genetic component.
It seems to me, even though more research is necessary, they're showing now that technology actually increases the dopamine in your brain, the pleasure center in your brain. So doesn't it only make sense, Dr. Wellner, that the prolonged use of these games would, for some people, increase the dopamine in their brains as well?
Well, sometimes research isn't needed. When you hear Quinn Pitcock basically telling you, I have every reason to be invested in my career, and I basically threw it all away, that's a very familiar story to anyone who's dealt with the addiction model. So whether it's dopamine or whether the game is designed in a particular way to continue to absorb people for hours on end with different scenarios and different changes, I don't think that the game developers are blameless. I think they're absolutely complicit in just as the tobacco industry was, and that's why they have to be dealt with the same way.
How do you treat it then? How do you wean someone off these games?
Well, we treat it very similar to someone who suffers from alcoholism, someone who suffers from a food addiction. We really have to focus on thoughts, feelings, and behaviors before, during, and after being on the internet. Now, we can say to someone, stop using, engaging in the game, but we may not be able to say stop being on the internet.
Jim Steyer is the founder and CEO of Common Sense Media, which studies the impact of media and technology on kids. Jim, I know that you spoke with White House officials during the aftermath of the Newtown shootings. And Adam Lanza apparently did play violent video games, we've since learned. What did you tell the White House officials?
We said, look, there is a culture of violence in this society. And like all of our guests have said, you can't just blame violent video games for all these actions. But are they a contributing factor to a culture of violence? They clearly are. And the video game industry largely is in a culture of denial. They constantly blame parents. They constantly say there's no pure research. The truth is, we know this is an issue. The White House knows it's an issue. They proposed research, by the way, $10 million, and the industry's opposed that, as if they say there's not a problem here. So we have a culture of violence and a culture of denial going on.
In fact, Jim, I know the industry fended off government action 20 years ago.
Right.
And you think Captain Kangaroo even testified that more restrictions or regulation was necessary. But they fended it off by putting ratings labels on video game boxes. Why isn't that enough in your view?
Well, first of all, that's the fox guarding the chicken coop. The truth is, how would we let an industry that denies the science, this is like climate change deniers, then say, we'll rate everything and don't worry, all parents need to do is read the box, where there are no laws that restrict the sales. So this is a big issue, and the industry has basically buried its head in the sand and actively opposed positive measures.
You supported a move in California that would prohibit
Correct.
young people, anyone under the age of 18, from buying video games, correct?
Correct.
And
From
it did
buying
not
the game.
pass.
It did pass, and then it was struck down by the Supreme Court on free speech issues, on the idea that a teenager has a free speech right to play the game, which we thought was silly. It was about sale. It's like alcohol or tobacco sales to minors.
In fact, Antonin Scalia, in that Supreme Court decision, which basically said it was unconstitutional to restrict video game sales, wrote that evidence linking games to violence was unpersuasive, and they had the same legal protection, meaning the video games, as violent literary classics like Grimm's Fairy Tales or Snow White.
Well, all I'll say this is, Justice Scalia was my con law professor at Stanford, and he was frequently wrong as my con law professor. And he was wrong on that one, and other justices agreed. And the public has to demand more, and our politicians have to have some courage backing the needs of families in this country. I commend.
Well, we want to mention that we reached out repeatedly to the Entertainment Software Association. It represents the video game industry. We asked them for a comment about Daniel Petrick's case and about video game addiction and violence in general, and we did not get a response. Up next, does someone you love have a video game obsession? Dr. Wellner will be here to tell us the signs. That's right after this. So how can you tell if someone you love has a dangerous video game obsession? Psychiatrist Michael Wellner has some signs to look for in your children or in someone you love. You say one of the signs, Dr. Wellner, is when someone starts abandoning friendships.
Sure.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for many people, and we've heard two stories with a common denominator of reason that people had to make a big change in their lives and to become more isolated. In one case, it was someone who was more depressed. In another case, someone who was who was injured. And sometimes video games can be a social substitute. But if you recognize that your child has a healthy social life with friends and attachments that bring them joy, and they summarily change, become a different person, that's an indication to you that the video game playing has inhabited your child, has really taken them to a place where they're no longer on the path and developing the way they were, and that has to be redirected.
You also say an addict starts neglecting responsibilities.
Well, think about it. You'd normally work out, you normally keep yourself in shape because you're expected to perform. You stop paying attention to your health, you stop eating right, you stop exercising, you stop working, you show up late for work, you endanger your job. So there are all kinds of aspects of abandonment of responsibilities where you can say, this isn't recreation anymore. This is where you're losing control of your daily function.
You also say pay attention if someone's performance starts slipping. What are the warning signs of a slipping performance?
Grades.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the wonderful avenue that parents have. Pay attention to your children's grades. talk to your teachers, listen to what they have to say. Is there a change in your child that's not explained, that there are no drugs, but clearly a child is disengaged from school, and it's not depression, but it's something else that actually is their recreation.
In fact, Mark, did you see Danny's grades start slipping? Did you see some of the signs in retrospect that this was happening to him?
His grades did not change. He just became very withdrawn. Very withdrawn.
You know, Katie, it's an escape. It's clear. I have 4 kids, and one of them is 18 and he likes to play video games, but we really restrict it. It's an escape from pressure. I'm sure that was true for you, Quinn.
Yeah.
It's an escape. You disappear into that world, and then
virtual reality you can control.
Virtual reality replaces reality that we know. It's such a big deal.
Yeah.
And those are all signs, and I think parents out there really need to be aware of this. You're right, it can show up in grades, but you can see it as a parent. They get so into it that you take it away from them, and sometimes there are really extreme results.
Well, as you said, there are a lot of contributing factors,
Correct.
right? And so I think what's really terrifying is when these video games get in the hands of kids who are predisposed to violence, who may have some of those other personality traits present. And I think that's when a kid turns into Adam Lanza. That's when a kid turns into Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold at Columbine. I mean, if they have sort of all these factors, I think it just feeds into it, doesn't it?
I think from a professional perspective that the significant watershed of this day and this discussion is that we've all been of a mindset of look out for your children and make sure they're not involved in drugs. And as long as you make sure they're not getting out, they're out and getting high and they're with their friends, it's okay. And I think that perhaps one of the keys to being able to eliminate this or to mitigate it is to have a dialogue with your friends' parents. Other children's parents are part of that village that is so fundamental to addressing at a community level where we can make a difference.
Well, does someone you know have a dangerous video game habit? You can head to our website at katiecouric.com and take a quiz to help you find out. We'll be back with some final thoughts right after this. I think this has been a really fascinating and important conversation today, and one we hope will continue. A huge thank you to Mark and Quinn for sharing their difficult stories, as well to Dr. Michael Wellner, Colleen Moore, and Jim Steyer. We'd love to hear your thoughts on violent video games. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter, or please visit us at katiecouric.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.